Make no attempt to reload your device. You are now entering the Hellhole.
Hello! La la la. We're alive, pal! We got audio, yeah? Looks like it. Looks like everything good. Wow, it's been a while. It's been a hell of a month. It's been a roasty toasty month, but we're back. We're live, and you know, there's been stuff going on. We might as well check some of it out. That's kind of what we do, when we do, if we do. I'm Internet Sensation McLucifer. This is the Hellhole, and we're here to discuss some of the goings-on in the world of video games. There has been a Nintendo Direct partner showcase, and I guess that's where we're starting. Is this a surprise? I don't know if this is a surprise or not. Generally, not terribly interested in the offerings of the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, but this one kind of caught my eye, so we're passing the trailers that have been coming out in February. The Nintendo Direct was kind of the big thing. Last month we had the PlayStation Showcase, which was all kinds of exciting. You can check that out in the archive right now. It's the last thing I did. I've kind of been incognito, persona non grata for a couple of weeks here. This game, Endless Ocean Luminous trailer, really intrigued me. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted by spam in the chat. We're live, pal. We're back.
Each dive, offering new things to discover. Up to 30 players online can plunge.
Yeah, this was the one that kind of stood out to me, and I don't know if that's surprising or not. It's not a game that I'm aware of. Endless Ocean Luminous. We're back in the deep sea kind of genre. I feel like that's a pretty prevalent kind of idea right now in games. I feel like there's been a lot of this stuff. Look at this. This is like impressive. It's a little bit creepy. It's a little bit like, you know, Echo the Dolphin, the creepy factor of being under the sea with these giant creatures. And it looks like there's like dinosaurs or prehistoric, you know, fish. Was there like some kind of gnarly looking shark thing before? Was it a zombie shark? I wouldn't want to speculate. Who am I to classify? I just think this looks really cool. And then, you know, I think of Subnautica, which was a game I was playing for a while, probably a year or two ago now. I should go back because I know I was making progress and I kind of bailed. The same things happened with Apotheon. I don't know. I like a bit of variety. I like to bounce around. It doesn't mean that it's over. It just means it might take me a while to get back to it. But Subnautica, as much as I enjoyed it, it didn't quite pan out the way I thought it was going to. I thought it would be much more about exploration. I'm generally not that excited about these kind of like crafting games and stuff like that, where you got to essentially just you follow formulas, but it's all a little bit arbitrary. You're not really, you know, the process isn't really there. It's not really about that. It's just sort of like about checking these boxes and then you get X as a reward. I don't know. There's something about that I always find a little dissatisfying. There is a sort of like Subnautica quality to this with some of the, like the biomes, the environmental style and all that. There's that shark. Is that shark? That shark looks pretty gnarly.
This
Reeds. I mean, some of these environments really remind me of Subnautica. I mean, that's going to happen when you're going for sort of like a photorealistic undersea adventure. That's interesting that you can go online with like 30 players. That's maybe something a little bit new. But I gather, looking at this trailer, maybe it's a little bit more about the exploration and just sort of checking things out and stuff. Look at that. That's not a normal shark, surely. That can't be. That's not what sharks look like. There's something about large aquatic life that creeps me out. There was that, there was the Echo game. I don't know if it was Dreamcast. It ended up on PS2. And there's some of that, even like where you're coming up on like a giant whale, and it's sort of like, it starts the dark sort of looming shadow in the murky depths, and then you come upon, I don't know what that is. Is that just like it's like the human thing of we're so tiny and insignificant? I don't know. Interesting. You can see like there's a skeleton. There's it looks like there's like sunken ships and stuff. I just think this looks like a cool, good time. It's probably a fun kind of thing to play. Interesting. I guess while we're on Switch games, it's been reported today, coming out of Japan, that there's talk that the follow-up to the Nintendo Switch could be coming around this time next year, March 2025 kind of thing. Talk is that it might be sort of like a Switch HD, and I'm just curious because, like, I would kind of like to get a Switch, but, I'm not a rich man. I can't just pick up a console on a whim, and these things, the prices stay really high. And to me, even like just objectively as a consumer, I'm looking at it, the cost to sort of like value is not something that I'm very comfortable with a lot of the time. So I'm curious, will this mean that Switch prices finally come down? Because they're really quite expensive for what they are, and even, the PS5 has been very expensive, and that's something that I've sort of been following. Would love to upgrade, but these things, like how much am I really going to play them? And for the expense, things feel a little bit out of whack. I don't know. Some of it's the technology and issues surrounding that. Let's not get lost in that. I just thought it was interesting that we sort of have now an outlook for what's coming from Nintendo in the near future. I'm curious then, a game like this, will this show up on the Switch HD or whatever that might be, in a year's time? What kind of like generation to generation support is there going to be from Nintendo? Because they kind of have this history of selling you the same thing over and over again. Like, how many times have you bought Super Metroid in one form or another? That kind of thing. You were buying like the Virtual Console version on Wii, and then there was Wii U. They could sort of sell stuff again. Maybe not quite as dramatic, and then to the Switch. There's just like, how many times have you bought the same thing from Nintendo? Does this transition to the next generation of hardware? Does that facilitate another round of selling you the same thing? Although, I mean, like, as far as those classic like 8 and 16-bit games, how many of those do you actually own, or is that now all tethered to the online service? Which is maybe a vote of confidence for the transition from this generation to the next, and in terms of maintaining your library and the support for things. Like if I buy a Switch and then the Switch HD comes out, what is the long-term experience value there? Can I still enjoy that? So many of these things become tethered to online aspects. I don't think, I presume if I own like a Switch game on the little memory stick thing or whatever, the chip, I presume I can play that whenever I want, but I'm always conscious of the fact, like, there are games now that are tethered to online that are essentially the disc is worthless, sometime in the near future. Hopefully that won't be the case with Endless Ocean Luminous, because this looks really cool. I don't know. Trailer, it's difficult to get a full sense of how big the experience is, because you would like this to be like a really big, robust, I mean, that looks really good. Exploring like an underwater temple or something. All of that stuff, just the exploration seems very appealing to me. I think that's really good. So that's something, that caught my eye. It is the first, the first of many. So there is not much else coming out of the partner showcase that really appealed to me, but this one, I like the idea of Disney making like really sort of hardcore Disney products. You know, not just the acquisition era has been really off-putting to me. I don't think I'm alone in that, thinking that it's sort of, you know, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all the Marvel stuff. You know, it's a little bit off-putting. So I like these kinds of products where this is hardcore Disney. This is something you can only get from Disney. It's classic Mickey. It's epic Mickey rebrushed, which is disappointing from the sense that it's something old that's just being brought forward. And this is like a prime example of that thing of how many times are you going to buy the same thing over and over again? You know, for me, that's immensely dissatisfying. I don't like a lot of these remakes. Just apart from what's lost in the transition, like we're looking ahead to the Silent Hill 2 remake, which seems inevitably destined to be lesser than at the best. You know, at the very best, it will be a lesser experience of Silent Hill 2. Most of them are, at least for Epic Mickey, you know, this might not be as radical a shift. You know, this might just be sort of bringing it forward. It's graphically a little bit better. Maybe there'll be some sort of quality of life improvements. I don't know. Again, for me personally, I didn't invest in Epic Mickey. I thought it was a very interesting concept, and I like the sort of, you know, the painterly aspect to it all, and I just like that it's classic Mickey. And you know, if you got a Switch, if you never played Epic Mickey, maybe this is cool. I don't know that there's a lot to say about it. I'm not like some great Epic Mickey expert or anything, but I just thought it was worthy of acknowledgement. Looking at the trailers that have come out this month, we probably breezed past Endless Ocean a little too quickly. We can always come back to that, but has this played through? I don't know. How long have we been doing this? I think we're still on the first run. All of this is interesting. The timing of it, of course, with the with Steamboat Willie entering the public domain is sort of interesting, because now the relationship with classic Mickey is changed, and there's probably pros and cons to that. I think it's brought classic Mickey Mouse to the forefront of the mainstream, you know, zeitgeist and awareness. But obviously, you know, from a gaming perspective, obviously now we got to endure like these chintzy horror games that just sort of arbitrarily shove in whatever character they can. Winnie the Pooh has suffered this indignity. Classic Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse is going to suffer that indignity. It's got a little bit of that like never say never again thing, where you got to like, you're extrapolating something new from this original source, because you can't just wholesale do whatever you want with Mickey Mouse. It's that original incarnation. It's that Steamboat Willie. You got to derive like sequels from Steamboat Willie. It was in there. It was in the little film. We saw it. Yeah, so like, at least this is an authentic classic Mickey experience, and presumably Steamboat Willie is in there. That kind of stuff. Like I said, I haven't examined Epic Mickey in great detail. From what I gathered, I think it was a little bit disappointing when it came out. There were some elements that fell short of that sort of lofty presentation and promise of the concept of sort of like, you know, interacting with environments with the ink and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. This seems like if you're going to bring it forward, you know, that's a good thing, I guess, in terms of accessibility and all that kind of stuff. I don't really know what the status of like Wii games are too. Like, how easy is it to experience a Wii game? I mean, I presume it's, if you've got the console, if you've got the game, you can play the game. I don't know. I do like the idea that you know, generation to generation having a maintained persistent access to these things and maintaining your collection. So if you've purchased a game, being able to carry it through, you know, that kind of thing's very attractive. I like that from the PS4 to the PS5. I'm sure Xbox is doing that same kind of thing, where you've got, you know, a persistent support and availability. I think that's a great thing. And, you know, accessibility is a good thing to have as well. You know, just, I want to play classic games, and sometimes, but I want to have a certain, you know, convenience and luxury of the experience and just all that kind of stuff. So that's cool. I'm a little bit always down on a remake or a re-release. Give me something new, really. I mean, it would have been exciting maybe to see an Epic Mickey sequel that did advance the concept and maybe cash in on it a little bit better rather than a straight remake. You know, I think that's, even if you could, I don't know, yeah. I'm always just in favor of do something new, move forward, advance. We're so bogged down culturally, just in the broad sense. We're just so bogged down in like IP management, IP farming, re-release, constant like repetition. We're getting nowhere. We need to advance more. So like if they could have done something new, that might have been nice. But in any event, we're gonna immediately talk about something old again, because as much as maybe the Nintendo Direct didn't fill me with great inspiration, there were other things going on, and limited run games were doing some upcoming release promotion, and Ninja 5.0 is one of them. It's going to be like a 2003 is it DS? Is that DS or Advance? I think it was DS. Game. I'll check my facts. Again, like I'm not a big Nintendo guy, so I'm not across all this. Oh, it was Game Boy Advance. It was Game Boy Advance. When does DS? DS is probably a little later. I never played this. I think I vaguely remember it coming out, or maybe hearing about it sometime afterward. I don't really know. I think it was called Ninja Cop in PAL regions. I think I read that. I think this is cool. This looks like a good sort of 16-bit style. I'm a crazy big Shinobi 3 fan. I love Shinobi 3 and Shadow Dancer and all the Shinobi kind of games. And obviously, on the record, very excited for what's coming from Sega. They got a new Shinobi and all that stuff. Hopefully it's going to be great. Hit the archive. You can see all about that stuff. But here we got an old game coming back thanks to limited run games, which is really good. I don't know, I understand mixed feelings about limited run games and their practices and the nature of the limited run. It seems to be one of those rare cases where maybe like down here we do a little bit better out of it because they sell them in retail, and I've been able to get like a couple of games here and there that I've been interested in quite easily just locally, whereas I think there's a little bit more competition if you're in the United States or other parts of the world. You're kind of, the limited run nature comes into effect, whereas here we've been able to really be able to access these games commercially through. There's a particular JB Hi-Fi. I'm sure you would have heard of it if you know Australia. That's where I usually see the limited run games. They're probably available elsewhere. I'm not really sure, to be honest. That's just usually where I'm looking. I nearly picked up Blasphemous. That was like $19. I think they cleared it, but that's cool. So I like that. We're getting these kinds of things. I don't know, like in terms of release. Is this going to disc, or is this just a digital release? I'm not really sure. It seems like a very small thing to have on a major release. I don't know. Regardless, the game looks fun, and it's the kind of thing that I might like to check out if it was cheap. It's kind of scratching that itch that hasn't necessarily always been scratched. I mean, we've had like The Messenger and Cyber Shadow. I enjoyed that. Those are games that I might like to go back to sometime. I don't think I did finish The Messenger. I didn't stream it, but I finished that and had a good time. Seems to be like streaming. In the streaming era, my relationship with gaming has changed a little bit. I haven't been playing a whole lot this month. Apotheon is still there, ready to be conquered, but we're not worrying about that too much. I've been noodling around with something. Who knows if and when that will produce fruits, but there is an idea that sort of has been bubbling away while I've not been present here in the Hellhole. I don't know. This looks cool. I like all this kind of stuff. Ninja games, pretty classic. Comes out in 2003, but is almost a throwback at that point, I would think. It's very much a throwback to like 10 years prior, early 90s, late 80s. The whole 5.0 thing, I guess, was sort of like an ironic little twist on it. It just looks cool, man. I like these kinds of things. I like these platformers that you can just jump in and play and have a good time. And it's sort of like a snappy experience, nothing too complicated. Particularly, if you can take a few weeks off and come back to it nice and easy, that suits me just fine. So it's on PS4, PS5, Switch. I don't know if that's digital or not. I presume so. I presume it's digital. I don't know if it's digital only. But that looks cool. You know, in terms of February game trailers, if we're gonna isolate some stuff, I felt like that one was worth mentioning. I kind of like that. You know, we've been dominated by fighting games in doing these kinds of like trailer watch things. So I'm enjoying that this month. Feels like there's some other things going on.
Pure
Again, like
radiant.
I'm not necessarily gonna
He wields love
play all
to
these
shrive
things, but
clean the hearts
I'm
of
interested.
men.
I want to know. I want to know, and I want to be enticed by exciting new experiences. This, is this
Nothing
new?
more terrifying.
I suppose so. Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC trailer, hotly anticipated by a lot of people. If you head to the archive, I played Elden Ring for a while. I don't think I really got that far, to be honest. It took me a very long time. Something that I might go back to, because I have a very sort of mixed feeling about Elden Ring. My relationship with Elden Ring is not entirely positive and not entirely negative. It's that sense of
In that
discovery,
forsaken
and I
place,
like sort of, you're presented with a challenge.
Blood must spill.
Takes a little bit of effort,
Blood
you
of
clear
your
the
fellows.
challenge, and then you move on to the next challenge. I like that aspect of it. I like some of the exploration you sort of get. It sort of oscillates between that back and forth. You get sort of like more designed areas, and then you're back in
They'll
sort of
never
the open
sink.
world. So I like elements of that, but it's interesting because, like, I guess there is a story implication for Shadow of the Erd Tree and how it's moving forward, the characters that are here, its place in the world and timeline and all that kind of stuff. But I just find that so uninteresting, and the story is so inconsequential. It's like these sprinkled bits of lore, but you assemble all of this information, and to what end? The delivery systems of story just don't interest me. If you were here when I was playing Elden Ring, or if you're going back and checking it out, that will be a recurring thing. You know all about that. I look at it as I almost look at Elden Ring as like a format, because I gather it.
Keen to know.
I gather the sort of the open world aspect is maybe a little bit different to most of the Souls-like games and the From Software games. I'm certainly not any kind of expert. This was the first one that I'd ever played. Elden Ring was my attempt at giving it a shot. I enjoy things like this, like big bodies of water and boss fights. I don't know. I presume so in the DLC. I think some of this is like you're revisiting old locations, but maybe new things are going on. I don't know if this is like a literal extension.
Come now.
Because I finished the game, so I don't vividly know all the details. I know that the environment changes quite radically, and there's a shift in the hierarchy. And obviously, the nature of your entire playthrough is that you are advancing up the chain, kind of thing, shaking the tree, as it were. I don't know. I can't speak to specifics, but I know the general thing. So I don't know. Is this like a straight sequel? I don't know. I just don't know, and it's not all that exciting to me to find out. You got to put a lot of effort in to find the story. So I look at Elden Ring in particular as like a great format, and I even I've got grievances with the Spider-Man games on PlayStation 4 and PS5. This is
and radiant.
I don't think I know it's come up, but I probably haven't discussed it. I streamed a little bit of the PS4 game a little bit in sort of before the Hellhole became a big thing. There was no face cam, but I was having a miserable time. I find those games just so tedious as games and so disappointing as Spider-Man products. But so looking at Elden Ring, it sort of strikes me like if you could skin this, if this could become a Spider-Man game, and if you had the benefit of just that more tangible story, that more focused story of like a Spider-Man game, but with the format of Elden Ring. So I'm even thinking of straight up like,
In that forsaken
you've got
place,
those Everjails, and I'm thinking like, so that's
blood
where you
must spill.
go down into the sewers, you
Blood of
fight
your
the
fellows.
lizard, you fight vermin, guys like
the
that.
tree faithful.
Identifiable characters who come with a bit more context than the Elden Ring characters, because it's sort of like,
They'll never sink. They just happen to be
who
on
these
the
people
losing
are, they're not
side
that
of the
interesting, it's repetitive, and I don't really care, and the story's kind of like vague and not that interesting. And what's the payoff? I feel like something like Spider-Man, it's more like keg frosting. It's not necessarily hugely complicated, but it's very, That's the virtue of it. It's very forthcoming, it's bright, it's colorful, it's sweet. And I feel like that would balance well with the sort of like the cake of Elden Ring. You know, if you could just layer it with all that kind of stuff. These metaphors probably not really addressing the DLC that we're seeing on screen. I haven't really been acknowledging the trailers themselves. We're really just, let's talk about what we're talking about. Let's analyze the analysis. I don't know. I mean, some of these characters look interesting. The big fiery guy looks cool. More knights. It's sort of, in some ways it's a little bit more of the same, but maybe if you're playing Elden Ring, that's what you want. That looks kind of exciting. That was almost like a, more JRPG. This thing looks freaky. I don't know what's going on there. I do like the boss fights where you're in this sort of like shallow body of water, that kind of thing. There's something about that. I find that appealing. It's a very small thing, just that your character is moving across this very shallow water. Adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of atmosphere to the whole experience. I guess, that holdover from the days when just generating CG water was impressive. I don't think that's it. I think it's the nature of it, though. I don't know, man. It's been a hell of a month. I'm bushwhacked. That's Shadow of the Earth Tree. We're zooming through these things. I say that usually these trailer sort of sessions have been quite fighting game dominated. Inevitably, we got to check out Street Fighter 6, which is gearing up for Ed. We saw the Ed teaser trailer last time we were here in the Hellhole. Ed is not a character that I would say I'm very excited about. Going from not being very enthusiastic about the world and characters of Elden Ring. I am massively enthusiastic about the world of Street Fighter 6 and Street Fighter. It's probably not well documented, but it's certainly well on the record. I am a fighting game tragic. I don't tend to play them in the Hellhole that much because I'm not that good at them, and I love them, and I don't want to see them, sullied by me and my mediocrity, but I love Street Fighter. Ed is sort of pretty low down on the pantheon of characters, if I'm totally honest. I dig this kind of like Shadowlow lab situation we got in the background, in the stage. That's pretty cool. I'm liking like the boxing style of Ed. I think in terms of play and just the presentation of the character's fighting style, I think that's quite interesting. He's almost I'd almost think of him as like the Steve Fox to Balrog and Dudley. He's a little bit more of that lightweight, featherweight. I don't know what weight class Steve Fox is in. I can't think. He's got a little bit more of that kind of style, though, the lighter style, whereas like Balrog and Dudley, they're much more the heavyweight boxers. So I kind of like that. And there's he got the alt costume, which is more of like a boxer. I kind of dig that more than his main look. It's not like an iconic, design that we're going to remember for years to come, but it's just in terms of the aesthetic of the character, I like that a little bit more. And I guess Street Fighter 6 has kind of maybe had a little bit more of that sort of sports feel in the world, in the presentation, in the characters. So this kind of works for me. It's sort of like the boxer training style. He's got all these like psycho powers. Is Ed one of these he's one of these Shadowlow experiments who's gone amok. I'm not really into Ed. I didn't really pay attention to Ed. I think Ed was like, Street Fighter 5 DLC. It's interesting the way Capcom and Street Fighter are sort of, in some ways, using the Street Fighter DLC not just to sell you classic characters, but also to expand the roster. A lot of the characters seem to be these sort of like slightly generic, but new additions to the roster. It's an interesting approach because it's not really, I wouldn't think that is the wisdom of DLC. I would think DLC, you want to sell people things that they know because, you're generating extra whatever, but I guess it speaks to maybe the approach to the DLC where it really is extra. They're not just holding back, all your favorite characters and then making you pay extra for them. They kind of are giving you extra, and if you want extra, you can get it, kind of thing. Some of the talk this month has been about sort of the cost of DLC and extra costumes and things like that. I was digging the Tekken 8 They've got the Tekken 4 Jin Kazama, hoodie look, which is something I enjoyed. Tekken 4 is, I've said it before, Tekken 4 is sort of like one of my favorite Tekkens. It's maybe, for me, the last one that I felt was great all around, certainly in terms of presentation. Although Tekken is a sure bet. You pick up a Tekken, generally, you're going to be pretty happy. Tekken 7 was a little bit light on in terms of its extra modes and its content and stuff. It seems like Tekken 8 is really... Tekken 8 fixed that. I was looking at, there was an article, I think it came out this month, of Capcom sort of acknowledging the disappointment of Street Fighter V. Same kind of deal where, like, Street Fighter V was a bit of like a hot mess when it came out. It was missing things, and they sort of cobbled it together. I feel like an encapsulation of that whole Street Fighter V episode. Because I would say, on the whole, I don't hate Street Fighter V. There's things I like about it. But even just when they finally got the story mode going, it felt very much like they were looking over their shoulder at Mortal Kombat too much. And I don't think that's a good thing for anybody. Just generally, I think Mortal Kombat has been doing what it's doing, and it's good. We'll talk more about it. But Street Fighter got a little distracted, was maybe playing catch-up instead of doing its own thing. So Street Fighter V, it's a bit of a mess. And the thing, this encapsulation of the whole experience, I feel like, was in the story mode, where the character's hair is like freaking out. Like something so basic in the presentation of the characters and things. Like, you got like glitching hair or whatever, like the collision is going crazy. It was just it's a bit rough around the edges. It was a little disappointing. And I think, historically, that's always what separated something like Street Fighter from Mortal Kombat, was the high quality and just the thorough sort of attention to detail and this, it was really the premium quality of like Capcom games. Whereas like Mortal Kombat was the one that was a little bit rough around the edges. Here and there had its issues. So that was disappointing. But then it feels like Capcom, in these articles, they acknowledge that it didn't go well. They clearly knew it at the time. They worked to fix it, and that's what impresses me. So Street Fighter V, disappointing. Street Fighter 6, they go all in on something special, and I got mixed feelings maybe about the aesthetics and stuff, but generally I think Street Fighter 6, what a great entry into the series. It feels like it was a stronger step forward without sacrificing the classic elements of Street Fighter. You can check out in the archive somewhere. I was working my way through World Tour. I'm playing all these things, and yet I'm not playing them. It's a paradox like that. It just happens. Tekken did the same sort of thing. Tekken 7 was a little disappointing. It didn't have it was particularly baffling because Tekken has had these great extra modes of like Tekken Force, which sort of take you through a story, but particularly take you through a mode. And like Tekken 6, the campaign mode I ended up really loving that. I going into it, I wasn't totally sold, and then by the end, I just kind of like, I felt like I had a great time with it. And then Tekken 7, it's just like this little couple of chapters, and it was really disappointing. And I don't know. So again, Tekken 7 disappointing, Street Fighter 5 disappointing, Street Fighter 6, they're back, Tekken 8, they're back, fantastic. Make of it what you will in terms of DLC. I think the main game is good enough, and this is gravy. I'm interested to see, I think we've been looking at Street Fighter 6 DLC really throughout doing these kind of like trailer sessions, these little watch episodes where I'm singling out things that I think are good. We kind of knew from the outset that this was going to be a little bit of a weak season pass kind of thing. I think Akuma's the Goki, is kind of the big one. I'm hoping they have more maybe to deliver. I don't know. It's that tricky thing too of like, there's always that temptation of like you just want all your characters in, just bring them all in, sell them all individually, which is commercially disgusting. We don't want that as consumers. We shouldn't want that as consumers. And so it's sort of nice to see people rejecting some of the buying like individual costumes. I was talking about the Tekken DLC. There's big comparisons between the pricing on different franchises and things like that. But as a general rule, when you start adding up like how much it could potentially cost a person to buy one game through its lifespan, and it gets unhinged. It's ridiculous. So we don't want that, but at the same time, it would be cool to see more characters plugged into Street Fighter 6. But the thing I wrestle with is like, if I'm going to come up with a wish list of guys that are going to be in Street Fighter 6. Who's it going to be? Sagat would be an early one, but at what point do we have to commit to moving forward, maybe, and surrendering some of these characters? I mean, the thing I would say is if we do say goodbye to Sagat at some point, because it kind of feels like they're trying to move forward. I don't know if they ever abandoned the icons. It's the mistake of Street Fighter 3 that they did go so far away from them. So I do think it is a good idea to retain your icons, your money makers. You know, the impulse to jump so far forward is a really strange one to me. It's counterintuitive, counterproductive. But at some time, you know, we've seen the characters sort of mature a little bit through Street Fighter 5 and 6. So if we did say goodbye to Sagat, it might be cool to see Aiden back. You know, get him in there. I don't know, when was the last time Aiden was in a game? I don't think he was in Street Fighter 4, was he? I'm a little bit tired here. These are the kinds of things that I feel like I should know. I should know these off the top of the dome, but I don't. In any event, it'd be cool to see some of those characters. You know, I'm always on board to see Dudley again. I think Dudley would be really cool. Maybe he would match up with Ed. That could be interesting. I don't know who else. You know, I guess I might as well let the cat out of the bag. The thing I've been noodling around with is Muscle Bomber centric Saturday Night Slam Masters. So if some of you may or may not know me from my days blogging on oneup.com, which was a website that I loved, and I sort of did like a proof of concept. I was writing up some like fake wrestling results for Muscle Bomber, aka Saturday Night Slam Masters. It'd be cool to see some of those characters, you know, find their way into Street Fighter 6. I don't know why they've dropped those so much. I was asking some of the Udon Comics guys about the identity of some characters. I was curious if there was any kind of names attached to them or information. They're sort of like these fairly minor side characters. We'll talk about it at some point in more detail, but yeah, I was curious. I was asking them if they knew if there was more details, and no, as far as they knew, there's never been a name for these characters. But they were talking. They did mention that, you know, like Slam Masters, Muscle Bomber is a series that Capcom put down and never really went back to. They don't really revisit them. And I think, I'm forgetting now what the response was. They might have even said that the Slam Masters weren't made available to them for the Udon Comics. Although, if you look, you might find some cameos. You might find, I think there was an issue of Super Street Fighter 2, where there's a backup story, just a short backup with Zangief and Mike Hager fighting, and you can see in the crowd around them or at ringside there are some of the Slam Masters. So yeah, so those characters are not completely forgotten, and El Fuerte, you know, in Street Fighter 4 was very much felt like a direct throwback to El Stinger.
You really want me to punch
and
a hole
I
through
believe that for Street Fighter 5 they were doing character profiles, and they stitched El Fuerte's lineage to El Stinger through a mentor. I think it was Meteorita Jr., something like that. We'll be talking more about this stuff, don't worry. None of that is relevant to Ed. I mean, does that speak to the issue with Ed, though? Ed is just kind of like, to me, not an interesting character. He's not really in the classic Street Fighter mold. We've moved away from that. You know, the classic mold is kind of ended. You know, it was the issue with Street Fighter 3, because I'm one of the guys, you know, the way we remember history has sort of changed a little bit, particularly because maybe of the Evo scene, but Street Fighter 3 was a disappointment, okay? And I'm one of those guys, didn't like the freaks. Street Fighter is about, you know, like you gotta have your nationality, your martial arts style, and some sort of maybe extra flavor, some kind of gimmick. And you get all these sort of like anime-inspired freaks, not a fan. But as much as like Street Fighter 4 put all the classics back together, you know, Third Strike, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike certainly smoothed it over. We started to forgive. And to that end, you know, as much as Street Fighter 3 was disappointing with its balance of characters and elements, you know, you get a Dudley, you get Makoto, you know, there's good characters in there. It's not wholesale bad, but the the mix was way off. Like it was no good. Particularly when you still sort of at that time you had Street Fighter Alpha. That was the preferred series for me. I was in Alpha, and then you had the whole Versus thing going on with like Marvel and SNK, so you had better options. It was strange times. And we mustn't forget them. But yeah, I feel like we haven't really gone back to that classic mold. El Fuerte was kind of close. He was sort of, but he was very bland. That was the thing. Particularly in his like design, he's just like all white. His gear was just like his white mask, white pants. Just felt a little bit bland, and like Crimson Viper was kind of interesting the way it sort of she was like pulling on Angelina Jolie and the Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of thing going on, and she sort of felt like a little bit of flavor, but then she felt a little bit like an SNK character, which was sort of weird. But then yeah, I mean that's kind of been the modus operandi since. We haven't really gone back to like a full on. I mean, you could make an argument about Hakan. He's kind of in that mold. I guess Rashid is a bit like that. He's kind of got that mold where he's like, we finally got a Middle Eastern fighter, which felt like, that's. I mean, it's great when they can go to areas that they haven't really touched on. So Rashid was like a good addition, and he kind of has, he's got that flavor. So I guess he's kind of like a classic Street Fighter character in that respect. Ed, not so much. But ultimately, that's where we're gone. We've gone on a big journey just to say, Ed, a little bit lame, a little bit bland, not really a classic. It'd be cool to see some classics. I would, if I was coming up with like a Street Fighter 6 wish list, really since, I mentioned 1UP, and I used to do a lot of like gaming, blogging, and coming up with ideas there and stuff, and I sort of, I made the pitch for Joe from the first Street Fighter game, Fighting Street, if you prefer, if that helps. The American kickboxer character. He's one of the few characters that never came back. And I sort of, so I think it's like 2009, I sort of wrote a proposal where it was like, let's survey the room. Do we need another sort of generic American kickboxer? Probably not so much. So what's missing in Street Fighter? They didn't really have, like UFC style MMA fighters at the time, or around that time. They were talking up the fact that Street Fighter was the original MMA game. It is literally a mixture of martial arts. It's very very true in that respect. And so I was sort of proposing that Joe left the train yards, a little bit down on his luck, and trained up in sort of MMA styles. So he sort of mixed his kickboxing style from the first game and his sort of sabat, the sobat kick or whatever. Mix that in with some UFC style wrestling maybe, and sort of get some of that MMA flavor in. And then when Street Fighter 5 came out, they did like a little bio. Oh yeah, and I was doing that as part of like the Slam Master stuff. So I was proposing that this sort of like MMA trained Joe then enters the Muscle Bomber sort of corner, the wrestling corner of the Capcom fighting universe. And then when Street Fighter 5 came out, they were doing these bios, and they sort of presented that he had become a wrestler of some kind, or was tournament fighting or whatever. So I'm sure it's just convergent evolution, but they're already they're probably thinking the same thing that I'm thinking, like this is the natural course. So it'd be cool to see him coming to Street Fighter 6. We went the long way to get there. Funny thing about Joe, we got to acknowledge this. Joe, one of the few characters who never came back. It's he and Mike, and then you've got that whole thing of like, well, is Mike Bison? Is he because he's a African American boxing guy, so is that the same guy? And we have it established, no, which I appreciate, and this is going somewhere, because then people thought, or there was also sort of like the arcade myth that the two guys fighting in the intro of Street Fighter 2, the guy that like smacks the other guy in front of the building, the thinking was, oh, well, that's Joe and Mike from the first game, and they're not in the game, but they're in the intro or whatever. But no, Capcom has clarified, no, those are two different characters named Max and Scott. And so the boxer was Max, and the guy that people thought was Joe, he was Scott. And I think, again, that's so cool, because we got these two extra characters. And then something coming out of the Street Fighter 5 bios that I've become aware of was that Max is the guy that Alex is fighting in the tournament during the Street Fighter V story mode. So that's really cool. I love that kind of stuff. I love the way. I mean, that's what I like about fighting games. It's the universe, it's the characters, and just the way they interact with each other, and what can you get out of that kind of stuff. So I don't know, man. I just love talking about Street Fighter. We don't have to have any kind of grand point. Ed, lame. Bring in some of the new characters. If you wanted to jazz up Max and Scott, that'd be pretty cool. Although for all I know, they might show up in the World Tour mode, because I haven't finished World Tour, and there are dudes in there. Retsu's in there. We came across Retsu a couple of times. Loved it. Fantastic. Make him a playable character. I don't know. You know, like a full-on. I mean, as DLC, that might be a little bit lame. We can probably expand in more interesting ways, but I don't know. I love fighting games. What can I say? Where do we go from here but down? Because we're going to challenge my love of fighting games. So Street Fighter 6 looking great. It's been the story. And then Mortal Kombat 1 has sort of, I don't know what's going on with NetherRealm Studios and whatever sort of difficulties are coming out of Warner Brothers, who are just, you know, obviously as a corporate entity, there's a lot of talk about, you know, what their practices are and how that's going on. And there's just the existing realities of working within a corporate infrastructure where you need to clear things, and, you know, the flow of information, the channels of decision making can slow things down. There was some kind of issue, so this next DLC character, Peacemaker, was delayed. Like, you know, if you're in the Hellhole, you got to know a few things. I'm a fighting game tragic, and comic books are a huge part of my life. You know, I learned to read with comic books when I was like 3 years old or something. So comics are a constant. I was a big fan of, or I am a big fan of, the 80s Suicide Squad comic series, which really brought I would say that brought Peacemaker to the fore as much as any sort of like Peacemaker series or anything, at least in that period. You know, he's originally a Charlton Comics character, is acquired by DC, and I really liked. I shouldn't maybe put that much emphasis on it, but for me, my appreciation of Peacemaker was very much enhanced reading the Suicide Squad comics. So it was cool that he was in the movie by James Gunn, which was an improvement on that first Suicide Squad movie, because that's god-awful. Like, that is just abysmal, such a miserable squandering of the characters and the property that existed. So James Gunn, he comes in with sort of like a soft reboot, pseudo reboot, and really definitely improved things. Still thought it was a little bit mediocre in general, but I appreciate like some of the costume decisions and designs and stuff like that. So, long story short, yeah, I kind of like Peacemaker. I think he was cool in the comics, and I really enjoyed that iteration. It maybe differed slightly from Charlton. I'm not as cross the Charlton stuff as I would like to be. But through the Peacemaker TV series and the movie, now we kind of got this thing of like, you know, in the comics, Peacemaker was he's a little bit disturbed. He's got some issues, you know, and which is carried through in the series, but the context has all kind of changed. Like, in the comics, his father was a Nazi. They got scared of that. Apparently vilifying Nazis is a problem. Like, what? What are you talking about? So they made him a different villain. Didn't really dig that kind of as a concept. But the real frustration is, like, now we're in the era of people think Peacemaker is the guy who dances and does all these goofball things and has a pet eagle and stuff. And I don't know. I'm not jiving with that. That's not really what I'm looking for. It did feel, particularly with what they did with Vigilante, it felt like they were doing some sort of like Deadpool kind of thing. Which was disappointing, and I'm already down on the Mortal Kombat 1 game, so when this version of Peacemaker shows up and now we got to deal with all the chucklehead gamers who think this is what Peacemaker's about, you know, I'm a little disappointed by that. John Cena doing the voice, you know, I don't have any strong feelings about that one way or the other. I'm not really a John Cena fan. You know, some of you might know me from my days like writing for ProWrestling.com. I had a column there many years ago, 20 years ago now probably, you know, and it was and I'll admit I didn't take it entirely seriously. I was goofing off. It was a dubious effort, and I did stop doing it at some point. So let's not go down that road. All I'm saying is, I'm also a pro wrestling fan. I never got into John Cena much. John Cena and Orton are kind of like deal breakers at some point for me. They certainly diminish the experience. I'm not here to shit on wrestling. I want Cody to finish the story as much as anybody. I think what The Rock's doing is really cool. We're just making a wrestling tangent now. WrestleMania's coming up. What can I say? I've been playing. Look, I'm going to be forthcoming. I've been mucking around with WWE 2K23. So I'm in a wrestling mode lately, which is not always the case. Peacemaker is in Mortal Kombat 1. I don't like guest characters in general. You know, I was talking about... I mean, how long did I just romance the Street Fighter and Tekken universes, particularly Street Fighter and Capcom and everything? That's what I love. That's giving me an experience I don't get anywhere else, and I love it. I have a deep love for Street Fighter and stuff. And Street Fighter's been kind of, you know, it's weird because Street Fighter and Capcom are kind of like the original crossover guys. You know, they did Marvel vs. Capcom and all of those games, starting with like X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which I played the hell out of. They did Capcom and SNK and all that stuff. But the way they kept it self-contained meant that they never really, although they sort of like, they're the peak of crossover games, they're also, the Street Fighter franchise somehow is sort of, it remains pure and unsullied by crossovers. Tekken, you can't say that about Tekken anymore. They've got like Walking Dead. They had Goki, Akuma. He was in there. They had Geese Howard. You know, I mean, this back in 2009 when I was blogging on OneUp.com, OneUp shut down. But at the time, I was working on like a few articles that were sort of like these. A lot of my articles were sort of like idea based and sort of think pieces, but not really think pieces as much as sometimes I was just like pitching ideas. And I feel like inevitably, when are we going to get the fighting game that is just like it's all the franchises? I feel like maybe I should just talk about that on its own because there is a premise there. Essentially, you know, in 2009 I was working on this thing where I was thinking, I nearly wrote for Mortal Kombat Online as well. I nearly did it for there, but man, the Mortal Kombat scene and Mortal Kombat Online, you just, you're probably not going to do that, are you? Because it's just not well received. The idea basically is that you would have a fighting game, and maybe it's a series, maybe it's digital dependent. I mean, that's sort of the avenue that's opened up much more than was around 2009. It was sort of like it was opening up, and now we've got full on. You know, we're looking at Peacemaker. He's a DLC character. The digital domain is open. Essentially, you create a game. I don't know what you call it. Super Fighting All Stars, whatever. World Championship Fighting. Doesn't matter what it's called. The point is, you would elect like maybe 2 characters from the major franchises, 3 characters, 4 characters, however many your roster needs, and it's just a fighting game where it's characters from each franchise playing the way they do, fighting for supremacy. That's the concept. And then maybe you would do an update here or there. Maybe there would be DLC. I mean, I guess that maybe is the kind of thing that would lend itself to a Smash Brothers as service, the kind of the way Multiversus was maybe developing. This thing is never going to happen, it doesn't matter. But yeah, just thinking of the way like Tekken has had several of the franchises crossover, Capcom. This is a huge tangent. I'm so sorry. I never made a tangent that I didn't like. I don't like guest characters. Somehow I went from not liking guest characters to now talking about the ultimate mashup of guest characters. I'm a menace and must be stopped. Peacemaker. I don't like guest characters. I don't like Mortal Kombat 1. So this is disappointing all around. And then, so what's your cameo fighter? Like, I'm ignoring the elephant in the room, kind of. Janet Cage? Like, was Peacemaker forced on them and they thought, let's sabotage it, let's do the lamest cameo we can think of. Well, it's Chick Johnny Cage from the girly universe, which was lame in the end of the game as well. Mortal Kombat 1 is just so... I mean, some of like the background's kind of cool. It's a little bit bland because there's so much detail and it's kind of washed out. It's a little too photorealistic. Some of the backgrounds are kind of cool, but so much of it is just like, like, what are you doing? And all of this is like, it's a reboot. You had good stuff. Look at the way Street Fighter 6 is like boldly marching into the future, carrying over like Retsu from the first game. You got like Final Fight stuff. You got this open world of Metro City and whatever. Hacker Stadium. You got all these wonderful aspects of the Street Fighter canon that have been built up over 30 plus years of all these wonderful games. And then injects this whole new thing of like a new control system. And you can create a character. There's these new young characters in there. I can't think of any. I guess like Marissa's kind of cool. Maybe I'm not as into the new characters, but I like that they tried. It feels like Street Fighter 6. It's like this bold march into the future. It's doing something new, but bringing what makes the franchise great with it. It's this great intuitive advancement. And then Mortal Kombat 1 is this weird regression where like, yeah, we're just gonna like break everything again and do another do-over. I don't know. Yeah, the whole thing is lame. Janet Cage, just like, you know, it used to be an old cliche in films. You had like son of Godzilla, you know, not Godzilla. That's a bad one. Son of the Fly, Dracula's daughter. You know, and then they tried out like this super half-assed like retread of what's been done, but they're not really doing it anymore. Like this gender flipping, it's just this half. I mean, it wasn't just, you know, I don't want anyone to fixate on the gender thing because that's not the problem. Okay, they're great female characters. We need more female characters because that's you gotta observe what's missing. So sure, yeah, give me some female cameos or whatever. I would argue maybe just do Cassie Cage if you want to do that. If you want to do like a chick character with Cage mannerisms and traits, who's from another timeline or universe. Cassie Cage, she exists. We have some attachment to her. She's not some half-assed like pseudo Johnny. She's a little bit more of a character. As much as Cassie was not one of my favorites, she exists. If you want to do this, do that. What are you thinking? You got like Johnny, some lady in Johnny's clothes. This is just, it's lame. It's really lame. And so much of Mortal Kombat 1 has been a bit like that. It's just disappointing, man. And how did this come about? I mean, they've talked about, NetherRealm have talked about, the people who've worked at NetherRealm have talked about the sort of like, no idea is off the table when we have these meetings. We throw it all out there. Maybe the next Mortal Kombat will be like one of the baffling examples was like it'll be a summer camp with Mortal Kombat characters as teenagers or something. Like, no, not anything goes. What are you talking about? Stop wasting time and focus on what you've got and refine it so that you don't get completely pantsed when Street Fighter and Tekken they've had like a little bit of a dip and then they come back swinging. And now Mortal Kombat like is the stooge of the whole thing. It's embarrassing, man.
Fatality.
It's not even that bad. It's probably not even that bad on the whole. It's just like these key changes. Don't keep rebooting. Don't keep breaking everything.
Flawless victory.
Like, is this not common sense? We've lived through these ages of these like arbitrary periods, of these fads of like, yeah, let's reboot everything. Let's just use the same title that already exists. One, you know, who cares? Let's make Scream 5, just call it Scream. Let's make Mortal Kombat 9, but just call it Mortal Kombat. And then let's do Mortal Kombat 1 in 2023 or whenever this shit came out. It's like it's just dumb. This is so stupid. Wait, who wants any of this? This is no fun. This is no fun. It's silly. I don't know. I'm feeling cranky. It's been a month. Like I said, it's been a month. I'm real tired. Let's put the Peacemaker away. Let's soak in the tranquil oceans. I like to say, you know, I like to sort of pick a winner when I do these things. Endless Ocean is my winner, I think. Endless Ocean Luminous. Is this a sequel? Is there an Endless Ocean and Luminous is the sequel? I don't think so. I feel like I've never heard of Endless Ocean. Maybe it's just a very long title. Does adding Luminous make it Is there a series? Are they planning a series, or is it just a way to make Endless Ocean sound a little bit more identifiable? SEO and things like that.
Endless Ocean game.
I don't know. This one, it's not setting the world on fire. It's not wildly rewriting the books or anything. It just looks like it's doing something cool. And yeah, I'd like to swim around in the deep sea, maybe with 29 other people online, and explore a ship or a temple or just the depths. See a shark, maybe see a dinosaur. It'd be cool if there's, like, I don't know, because this is a Switch game, or at least, I mean, I should mention, if you didn't notice, Epic Mickey Rebrushed. That's going to be on PlayStation and maybe Xbox, I'm not sure. Point is, it's going to be on other things. I don't know about Endless Ocean Luminous. This might just be a Switch game. If it is just a Switch game, does that mean, does that imply maybe a tamer experience? Because what I was wondering is, like, will there be, a bit like Subnautica, will there be some sort of horrific creatures of the depths that are extremely hostile, like the Ghost Reaper and all that kind of stuff? Will there be anything like that? Or is this basically what you see is what you get? There was a game, I think it was on PS2, that was an underwater thing. And I was curious, I don't remember it. I think I played a demo. I might even have a demo somewhere here, so I might maybe pull that out one day. I say that, I'm never going to find the time to do that. I can't even find the energy to play a regular PS2 game or PS4 game, let alone that. In any event, there was a PS2 game that was sort of, I think that was like an early example of a deep sea game that might have been about exploring and identifying species and things like that. I don't know. I'm curious. I wonder what that game was. I can never remember. But a lot of these games, they sort of, I think that's what they're going to be, and then they're not. There's always something else to it. Subnautica feels very much like a crafting game with like a little bit of extra, I don't know what. I like Subnautica. Subnautica's good. I don't want to sound like I'm down on it. I quite like it, but it wasn't quite what I expected. I don't know. So what? It doesn't matter what I expect. Is the game good? That's what I want to know. I think Endless Ocean Luminous looks pretty interesting. It's my winner for the week. What's your winner? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Anybody in the chat? Looks like people have been coming through the chat, but if you don't want to talk, that's cool. You don't have to. I don't mind. It's not going to distract me. I don't know. Sometimes I get distracted. Yeah, leave a comment if you're checking this out on the archive. Check out, we've been doing this like regularly now. This is the thing we do. We just, there's a month of game trailers, and I pick out the things that strike me as interesting. But what's the best that was here? What do you think of the showcase that we had? These are my selections. Do you think I'm onto something here? You think I got some good taste? Because historically, they tell me I have good taste. What am I doing? Yeah, what was cool? What's something that maybe I overlooked? Because I'm not always, sometimes I miss things. Maybe there's something that you think's cool. That's the exchange we're here for, I'm gonna like expose you to things that maybe you weren't necessarily thinking about. Maybe I'll raise a point or something that gets you thinking. Maybe you send one my way. Cultural exchange. Who would have thought? I think it's a good time. It's nice to be back. Hopefully I'll be doing more. I don't know. I kind of, I've got that like mental barrier now where I don't want to get back into Apotheon because I've stepped away from it. It's the kind of thing I might have to take a break. There's other things going on that I'm interested in, and I got my editing back during this month. It was basically, I was in the struggle. If you've been here, maybe you've heard in some of the recent entries, I was having some issues with like editing software and email hosting and stuff. Took a whole lot of effort. We broke through that. We got it done, and then I kind of just like, I guess I just sort of had to take a little bit of a rest after the struggle. It shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be that hard. But the company I was using shut down, and then they sent me to a company, and then that company didn't tell me what was going on, and it was a whole thing over like Christmas, New Year. Finally got it sorted, so that's cool. So editing's back on the table, which means even things that didn't seem to be editing dependent are back on the table. I want to get back to the trading card arc because things have been developing in the trading card, universe, and I've kind of, because I put it down, I lost a little bit of interest. I want to get back in. Check that out in the archive. There's all kinds of stuff in the archive. You know, go explore because I'm getting back into it. We've had a little bit of a lull. Mortal Kombat 1, Lucifer Timeline, fanfiction, action is something I want to get back to as well. That's on my mind. All kinds of stuff, really. And there's this other thing I'm working on that might not show up for a while, might never show up. I don't know.
What will you find?
Hopefully, I think I've got something that could be fun. I think it could be fun, and it might be regular, it might not be. Maybe I'll get back to Subnautica sometime. I don't know. Hope everyone's doing good. You know, give yourself a treat. Seek something out fun. Find something good. If you can find something that you haven't experienced before, that you have no frame of context for, I think that would be a great thing. You know, like I just I don't know. Recently watched last night. I watched Donnie Brasco, which I'd never seen. It's a little bit mediocre, but that's fine. It was a fine enough watch. I didn't hate it, and I finally got to see Tim Burton's Hansel and Gretel, which was quite an experience. You know, it's not something that gets. I feel like over the years, it wasn't something that was discussed a whole lot. Certainly not something that I heard much about. So to finally see that was perverse and intriguing and will haunt me. It's nice to get something new input, though. Things that I don't know vividly and can derive some sort of nourishment from. You know, that kind of thing's good for the soul. There's new music from Khruangbin. If you know the band Khruangbin, I can barely even say it. Go check that out, because that's out there. I don't know. We'll talk more. Have a good one. Adios, amigos. Godspeed.